Hey, welcome to Two Doctors Homestead. My name's Daniel, and today we're going to talk about fortifications or reinforcing your shelter. I consider this relevant on the bug in if you're planning on bugging in the event of a disaster or Shtf scenario, but certainly something you could look at if you're planning on bugging it out, right? If you got a bug out plan in the event something happens, some kind of disaster, emergency, zombie apocalypse happens, you could be planning on bugging out and understand. And certainly if you are going to bug out, you want to prepare for that ahead of time. You're more limited on what you can carry with you, which is why I tend to say this is more of a bug in type scenario. In any kind of a disaster SHTF situation, you want to start with the rule of threes: 3 minutes without air or emergency medical care. Any kind of bleeding, any kind of mass bleeding, gunshot wound, anything like that. Certainly you want to get emergency care, bandages, gauze, gas mask, right? If it's an air situation, the first 3 minutes, 3 hours without shelter. In any kind of extreme weather situation, you want to have shelter within the first 3 hours. 3 days without water, you have to have water within 3 days, more or less, or you start hitting that fatal dehydration. And then 3 weeks without food. So that's your rule of threes in any situation. You want to start with the rule of threes. Make sure you've got those covered, whether you're bugging in or bugging out. But we want to kind of move beyond that and hit a few focus areas to consider. I said, really, I'm leaning towards bugging in on this simply because some of this stuff is going to be more difficult to carry, right? It's a mindset. You could, if you're bugging out in a vehicle or an RV, you could have this with you as well. But we had said initially that we're going to talk about reinforcing your shelter or fortifications, and a good resource on that, certainly with the risk of nuclear war ever increasing. Highly recommend Nuclear War Survival Skills, Crescent and Kearney book. He did the original going back to 1979, and one thing I like about the book, I kind of missed my spot here, is about the back half of the book. Talks about constructing shelters, bomb shelters. You might call them bunkers if you want, but you've got some great schematics, designs. He really gets into building those kind of bomb shelters you might need in the event of nuclear war, which becomes ever more possible, it seems like, every day. But this is a good book if you're not an expert at construction or carpentry or anything like that. Certainly start with this book, start getting some ideas, right? So this is maybe your step one in terms of fortifications or reinforced shelter, is get this book. I think it might actually be available as a free download on PDF. I'm not 100% sure, I haven't tried that, but having a hardback copy could be useful in the event your computer stops working, or the internet's just not available at that moment. You're trying to build your nuclear fallout shelter. So start with this book, but that's not all I wanted to hit on. We're talking about fortifications. So I got these on Amazon. They're actually sandbags, and they come in packs. They were not super expensive. You can get a pack, I think these are packs of 100 for not too much money, and you can see they're good size. They come with ties. Fits nicely in a box. Doesn't take up a lot of space when you're not using the sandbags. Certainly classic fortification going back through the ages. You look back to World War I, World War II. People like their sandbags. They've done well. They tend to be relatively bullet resistant. Where I'm at, we get floods. We're in a flood area, so you'd want to have it for flood prevention as well. It doesn't all have to be doom and gloom per se. Good for flood prevention, good for erosion control. On your homestead, you might need to do some erosion control, but you might actually someday find yourself in a situation where you have to build a fallout shelter, and the sandbags would help with that. Dirt is really good at blocking radioactive waves, and once again, I said good at blocking bullets as well. Now, if you're going to get a sandbag, You might want a shovel. This doesn't have to be this shovel. This is just a shovel. I like this as a useful shovel. You know, it's good for in close digging. A longer handle shovel is probably good as well. There's a lot of bags to fill up, so I might actually lean towards a more long handle shovel. But once again, if you're thinking about bug out, you could take some of the sandbags with you. You know, block the rain and the radiation and the bullets on the go or around your house, right? And if you're looking at ways of fortifying or reinforcing your shelter, certainly sandbags is not a bad idea. I see other people talk about plywood over the windows. There's not a bad idea necessarily. You know, I have a friend that was up in Minnesota during riots, one of the sets of riots many years ago, and there was a riot outside his house, a violent protest, or a mostly peaceful protest outside his house. And he said, hey, that's actually was pretty scary, because he knew going in that the police wouldn't help you out. So if you think you're in a place where people might protest slightly less than peacefully, fortifications, once again, not a bad idea. You start with the windows. Do you have boards? Do you have boards for the windows? Some way to board up your windows? Do you have shatterproof windows? And that's good also for storms. You know, I'm in Texas. There's tornadoes out here. You might be in a place that has hurricanes, so not a bad idea at least to think about ways you might board up your windows, or think about plastic sheeting, right? Once the window's broken, you know, you might still need to cover that up, so plastic sheeting is not a bad idea, whether it's heavy trash bags or you can get tarps, any kind of plastic sheeting, and then some way to mount it, whether it's nails or tacks or duct tape, right? Think of a way to cover your windows or prevent your windows from getting broken. That could certainly be part of fortification or reinforcing your shelter, right? So sandbags is also could be part of that. Having extra building materials on hand, whether it's wood or bricks or, once again, sandbags, right? Something like that it's an age-old solution to a modern problem, which is sometimes you got to prevent stuff from getting in. Could be floodwaters, could be something else more nefarious and lethal than floodwaters. But think about fortifications, right? How would you fortify your shelter, fortify your house, and really on the go? You could certainly stop and use sandbags. You know, people, even in the book, like the Nuclear War Survival Skills book, was written or intended to be written in such a way that you could hear that, hey, nukes are incoming. You wouldn't hear that now, but you could hear nukes are incoming and take the book and flip to the page and be like, shoot, we need to start digging a bomb shelter. Whoa, got a wasp coming out. We need to start building a bomb shelter real quick, and flip to that page and get the shovel and get digging. And you know, the reason I say you wouldn't notice now is you see things like hypersonics and satellite HEMPs and stuff. You know, that's less likely to have a lot of notice if that were to happen. Not saying it will, and hope it never does, but it's a good time now to think about reinforcing your shelter, right? Certainly winter could be coming. It's not coming right now, but even winters or heavy rains, hurricane season, any of that kind of stuff, water might get in through the cracks, and having a box of sandbags could help you out there as well. And it might be great in the garden, right? You could certainly even use them as potato grow bags if you got tired of piling them up in the box in the closet. But once again, they weren't particularly expensive. They don't actually take up a lot of space, and could have multiple uses. So sandbags certainly for fortification. So thank you for watching. We're going to dig in a couple areas on just bug-in preparation beyond the 10 C's of survival, or the rule of threes, or the 3 B's, or any of that. Let's hit on a couple other areas, and fortification is certainly one, something to think about. So thank you for watching, and we appreciate you.